Okay, I'm good to go now.
Alright. We all good? Perfect. I was riding on the ship as the storm set in. We were slowly running out of gas and we needed to make it to shore quickly. I could see that we were coming upon a large city, that we were only 4 miles up, and the ocean rose with such an intensity that immediately we lost all direction. The ship began shaking as the waves crashed, but the sides of the ship wouldn't move, and there wasn't. And I'm trying to figure out how to move before it capsized. Now I heard in the church that way back when there was a man named Noah. Noah could talk to God and see pictures of him before, but they always make a line to pick her back. If my memory serves me right, the people from the land of the sons of God to let me start over. Noah was a black man who could talk to God. God told Noah to build an ark because they were going to flood the earth to rid the world of evil. Noah built the ark piece by piece and gathered each animal to survive the flood. Now I heard from the church here, the world began as water. They said that the great turtle island rose up from me. Now I understand why God wanted to flood the earth. I understand that water is holy to cleanse because it is where life begins, but it's also where life ends. I once read that when black ones were brought here, they were brought on ships, and sometimes they did not make it, and they were born to the ocean. Some of them did make it, but jumped into the water anyways, because maybe they wanted to become water itself. Maybe although water could cleanse the evil they were faced with. I wonder when I heard like a tree of everyone when I got to the floods, the Chimanacha and the Chada used to be there, but they were removed. The white folks made it up, and all that was left was black and water. When the Europeans brought black people to this land, they told us that it was an act of God. We did just as God said. But we built those plantation houses in Louisiana piece by piece, just like God built the ark. Why isn't God saving us this time? Why are we drowning? God's 10 years responsible to you for years like Katrina and when the country drove, but only if you learn that you left the right, when you colonialism, when you liberal, kept breathing the wealth, can use some higher knowledge, the idea of colonialism, that country went to the echo of colonialism, another one of the rest of the country, moment, and to argue spiritual, cultural, and political forms of response and across time as well. The social wants to go and Katrina, obviously, they occurred in different places, they had a different, most however, Lord Texas, a generation of like Katrina, we don't have to know generation of dogs, like completely reliable, source of Katrina, even more, simply depending on gasoline in this case, when we need to bathe and wash away when there's nothing there to inherit, we need some kind of energy source. Now, as I pondered, I took a plunge. I was truly to wash upon the shore. I kept calling out to others, but no one was calling back. And I took the place in this air that felt just like drowning. As I rolled to the shore, I found that I had slipped upon the city with a thick greenish gray haze wrapping around the top of the skyscrapers. I noticed as the heavy wind blew the haze dissipated. I walked toward the city to see if I could find my home. My mother, June Jordan, once reflected on what it felt like to be black and dying. It says means you are terrified of love. It means all references to future time leave you feeling ignored, irrelevant, or both. It means death is always blurring your vision. What tears is gone continues now. Queer realities will reveal the degenerate facts of being repressed out of the tool that can be generated and what that can share between moments and times and capitalities. Sometimes really 6 generations into the patriarchal familial and will compare the military response to ego to anything your vision. Granada, the Lord Charles Holly, English, having brother and child being torn apart by other and several repressive forces. This scene has flashed forward to post-extreme moments where we're filming onto which relocation based on arbitrary categories, but it also refers back to the countless scenes of enslavement, women, which they live in trouble for violence, separated through sales, slavery, the temporarily is traumatic, and one of the sins of trauma said inability to apply linear to memory. The poet's trauma says that it's still having to labor caring for their age, whether it's possible to show some continuity of community and relationships properly, reduce from social narrative in which the bodies of black women are suitable, that can be replaced anywhere that can sit to serve that is an ordinary violence and social relations that we were never supposed to also live in our bodies painfully, moving with the world through our bodies of spiritual way, both creative and destructive, alone, we radicalize our understanding of nature and our approach to reading the social literal text of the Lord and others left. We are doomed to reducing lessons. We are once again surviving the use of higher than the use of legal economics to read occupy while draining so resources within the United States in order to direct public money to private corporations. What we need is a way of looking that it's not limited to the protection of systems that have obscured those lessons to begin with by reading, teaching, and practice that embodies the transit pedagogy would have changed. Now the chaos of the storm city and the city itself was black. The people of the houses, there was no ladder. Reminded me of the plunge I take deep into the ocean. I wonder how I would find my mother. Once it's I wonder what type of space I would find because I thought about the place we lived growing up. I thought about those who had lived here before, and I thought about King's Place in 13. The yellow highlight. The process of living life, the process that I started before arrival on these shores, settlement lost settlements to become a human sexual cortex because it is active, but because of non-being, settlements and symbols of technology processes of the making of many devices of positions by settling these time space settlers able to become stable, coherent, autonomous, and human sexual while they also experience mobility, transcendence, settles, and better movement, expertise on the fixed and black bodies, clearing is a soul with some nerves of her, and the human is grammatical structure, this is discursive displacement, emergence and active displacement as the human emergence clearing a side of place, voice, settler violence, and action of indigenous bodies, settler also just as the original are stripped of their indigeneity and the land birds, the dead winds in, as the claim of life for the raw material and creature space they make space possible without often making a place about making a home. People have been attempting to create order and homelessness out of the apparent chaos of nature, both for bodies and the lands of the native black people are still creating us. They need to be ordered. What is hidden is that settle is not just about making physical illusion, rather it's the scientific process of rooting order to life to be savage, to be black, to exist in the realm of no time and no space. Now walking into the city, you would think that no one lived there. It looked almost like as I walked to the neighborhood near the shore, I saw a glowing green light coming from behind. I was curious when I got close person emerged out of the haze. You don't want to go that way. It was a woman from the radioactive south neighborhood. I asked her if she knew where I could find my mother. She pointed toward the city. I walked further into the next neighborhood of the city and found that my feet were sinking below me. I was curious what a person or behaves. You should get out of here. As a woman from the Brownfield West neighborhood, I asked her if she knew where I could find my mother. She pointed toward the city. I walked further into the next neighborhood. The city is shadowing the distance that looked as if I was a mountain range. I was curious because I got closer to a person emerged from the haze. That's not safe. It was a woman from the north neighborhood with piles of trash. I asked her if she knew where I could find my mother because she tells us in 2013. Past colonial out of creative material match charts and we find considerations to dealing with long occupied by others and investigating and condemnation of racial sexual death and racial plantations or segregations are just movements with land and going hard to distinguish between relations of colonial communities with some geography still being cast as uninhabitable for particular groups, geography settled into regress non-homogeneous communal model geographies for white men, white women, indigenous men, indigenous men, black men, black women, and black geographies were designated as incongruous with the humanist, the colonial act of geography, knowledge back a worldwide rooted racial condemnation. It is especially evident in sites of toxicity, environmental decay, pollution, and militarized acts inherited by impoverished communities, geographies described as battlegrounds or horrific, occupied, incarcerated, torn. We can culturally think of several places that are considered lifeless without history, like geography, suitable, capital slice of worship, and war-torn countries, reservation ghettos, and what's referred to as the global south now. Once said, I love the word survival. It always sounds like a promise. It makes me wonder sometimes, though, how do I define the shape of my impact upon this earth as I turn to the east to continue my journey? I felt the one that can upon my spirit is we're here. It is here where we find our mother. I was 10. Survival clearly exists by everything. Survival is a pedagogy, secret, and forbidden knowledge that we pass on. Economics, our labor, and the flesh of our market, the market racism denies survival. It's an act of survival, the performance, and aesthetic education to produce belief and resonance. We that was able to survive as a challenge to the gospel of individualism. Survival is a queer act for oppressed communities because it interrupts the social reproduction of the sanctioned deaths of those who were never meant to survive. Survival is in fact a possibility and a tactic, attack, and approach is a performative and poetic direction to a meaning of life with narrative or capital reproduces. Survival is only about the persistence of the body, the emphasis on the relationship between queer labor of black brothers and the interruption of a reproductive narrative about the relationship between bare life, reproductive life, political life, and reproduce the distinction between reproductive and political life, reproduction of the political definition of life of the narrative, abolition of the political racism through the criminalization of the black mother, for example, state of exception. The racialized mother is an exception to the narrative of the statement of the imaginative act of survival. She also reveals the reproductive labor of the black mother and its exceptionality is actually the work of emergency, both in the sense the sick codes black mother is a crisis, and in the sense that I read here the work of black, or work of clear black mothering to redefine survival allows a rival political and social emergency. Survival refers to ideology, but also to spirit by interpretation of survival beyond the body has two implications. First, it means that the queer survival of black feminism a specific lifetime as an individual black feminist, and that death is something with a power. The mode of power has shifted from the threat of death to the management of life. The pathologization of the black mother men, the pathologization of certain populations not only on their suitability but also pedagogical acts of archaic violence that enforce the disciplinary exclusion of some life from social meaning. Power chases down and erases the words and actions of the feminist understanding here even beyond death. The relevance of spirit of possibility survival places pressure on our definition of what life is and makes acts of ideological, psychological, physical, sexual, and economic lives that are identity to our spiritual well-being, even when they leave with our physical bodies entirely visible as violent markers of boundaries of life. The spirit of the work both precedes and exceeds the physical lifetimes. In each case, survival is possible for life and acts as a means of expression. I have a minute left. If you want me to read. Nope. Cool.
We'll take a second of prep.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, 9:50. Ready?
I am ready.
Why vote F?
Why would F? I think the 2 NR would be better than 2 NR. I think the F is a good idea. I think that if Joe thinks that the affirmative is better debating, strategically we win.
What about the F is good?
I think that affirming intergenerative practices of kind of queer kinships is key to destabilizing the kind of violent narratives that are presupposed on black laboring. I think that these kind of discourses speak existence into reality, and if we read it back, the kind of interpolation that like is coded on top of this kind of existence,
sure.
We create a kind of effective exchange for Taylor and I.
What does it mean to read them back into existence?
to read them back into existence. So the last card talks about survival as a pedagogy, secret and forbidden, right? It talks about these intergenerative responses that when Audre Lorde and June Jordan, when Ansel Dua speak, like I speak. I speak through that kind of invocation of voices because that type of like spiritual connection that I have to these like kind of violent structures does not end in death, but rather is carried through by these kind of intergenerative understandings of like spirit, of power, of relationships to this discourse.
So what about the 1AC creates an intergenerative future for future people?
We don't create a future. We don't say that we create a future necessarily. The imposition that we are the we that are never meant to survive is kind of the precondition for understanding our relationship to the present. Like, we don't produce like a future that you will understand, or think it is our job to produce like a future for you to like, I guess, live in.
It doesn't.
Like that coincides with the whole idea of like black laboring, that we're always forced to produce a world of possibilities. We think that is kind of like parasitic on the idea of. What do you mean?
How does Joe's ballot do?
Joe's ballot doesn't do like anything of the kind of the intergenerative practice. I answered your question above that if Joe thinks the affirmative wins on a strategic level, of the AF is a good idea, we need better debating, then you vote AF.
Okay. So what does the AF do about greenhouse gas emissions?
I would argue that in the status quo, there is kind of negative energy that is produced, correct? More than just kind of like GHG, but rather that black people are forced to produce energy that is always, one, making the world possible, but also two, is always parasitic on them, means i.e. energy is not received or experienced the same for everyone. We think of these toxic spaces that blackness is able to, or is like forced to inhabit, if we kind of re-articulate that narrative, we are kind of like a counter insurrection of energy. Rather, like we create energy for ourselves, which is always net negative to the energy that is always presupposed on us, which we think is kind of reducing climate change.
So the process of reading the intergenerational like narratives about things like Hurricane Katrina, things like this slave ship collapsing, is to inject a rejection of the negative energies normally imposed on black queer feminists.
I think white people have created negative energy that blackness and like redness are forced to live under. We think that the 1AC is a kind of like not a fight against those kind of narratives, but rather is kind of like we refuse to produce that labor any longer because the world is only possible through that labor of the black mother.
Okay.
I'm gonna get water real quick. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Are you set, or are you prepping?
A little bit more prep.
Okay.
Everything except these three. Yeah, it is. So I just need those two. Okay. That's good.
Okay, 854 remaining.
$8.54 you said?
Yep.
First, TA interpretation affirm is on the topic should restrict greenhouse gas emission. Restriction requires prohibition. City of North Carolina in 11 restrictions should be prohibited regulation. Any use, activity, operation, or thing that the subject of restriction prohibited, and specifically restrictions are mandated to limit the production that are distinct from other forms of regulation. And L in 89 failure to demonstrably effectively restrict domestic production to milk the use of the word prohibited. Permitted Article 10 will require there to be a limitation on the total quantity producers will authorize and allow the producer to stop proposal to amend Article 11 to replace the word restricted with regulations have been defeated will require the reduction of production. A violation. The firm doesn't defend the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. A vote negative first is ground we lose. All links to the stable part of the top. The firm has to defend command and control style restriction to ensure the negative can access the best economy on the top. This side links also lose our ability to pick out of the restriction and clash. Restricting greenhouse gas emissions mutually accessible topic that will allow the affirmative negative to debate strategies addressing warming. And third is ethics, climate change, and the moral crisis of governments, particularly in the global north. Climate change is ongoing violence. We are responsible for refusal to debate climate. It repeats the violence with silence. Decline in 16. Climate change is a more moral crisis every time the government and wealthy nations fail to act on the message that will global north and putting immediate comfort and economic security ahead of the suffering and survival of some of the most vulnerable people on the planet on Earth once again. The wealthy Western countries putting security for the least ahead of the interests of those fighting for survival once again. The message are serious not to go with yourself, grabs Rebecca. Solar right climate change is violence, some of the violence of the grinding slowly some is terrifying past when governments fit and only fail to prevent catastrophic warming. There is an act of violence and the violence of large and so global and inflicted against many temporalities simultaneously. There is not yet a word capable of containing its monstrosity using acts of violence to silence the voice of those who are not most vulnerable to climate change is yet more violence. Next off, critique. The era we live in is characterized by the Anthropocene. Their insistence on differences in forms of thinking with their modernity does not resolve the fundamental contradiction, but I only think it past the Anthropocene solves Colebrook. In 16, attempt to free matters to text many to deploy the language to the tropes that supposed to carry out in human linguistic terms. Also, one could think of the language of having an intentionality or the language that anthropomorphic. The problem with the Anthropocene is not so depoliticized by placing all humans into a guilty edge to overly politically assume something like the man whose human relation form politics to theorize the politics to politicize is the ultimately situated within described in human antagonist of theory has become politics, and politics become hyperhuman. To read politically is to focus on the consumption of human and compose and implying by the ability the full future might be otherwise. Theory has less to do with the reading and far more to do with trends and topics from bodies and animals. And points out the Anthropocene theories come to denote being firm understanding. The word of the standpoint one's lived experience, identity, reality, and encountering of different potentials to form new relative identities and how race selection, the unification of human subject creates a little bit of structure with marked deviance, racist text, text is race, but the negative utilitarian vision describes a Hegelian structural made their impacts and Colebrook in 14. There is a race towards extinction precisely because humanity has constantly self-asserted the idea of a single species differently as grounded single human race is the right and the reason enabled the human exceptions preclude any questioning of human right to live. Humanity is not a race, becomes a racial unity only via the virtual process of reterritorialization. Race and race is not as a result of discrimination, but is the only repressing the highly complex differential force of the fields they compose. Any being is somewhat like the linear notion any race can occur in life is sexual for living bodies composed of relation among differential powers because they produce no events encounters possibilities intertwined to form. Stabilities encounters are desired because they occur in the different forces that create assimilation outcomes. Race and race occurs with the production of difference, so they take the difference some relative same as at the beginning the same sex race or race if the encounter the different potential to form new emerging relative identity. Race and racism occur through the intersection of desire whereby bodies assemble to form territories. Race are kind of pulled from those acts at the same time. These sex are pulled from the encounters genetic differences. Race occurs through the reterritorialization when the social body is not organized from without but appears to be the expression of the ground expression. A full community presents itself in the national unified states when men and biological ground and the race might be seen as differentiation and the conception of the humans construct history of creative violence. The radical may seem to think in the wrong scale, like unable to resolve climate change. This turns case also cause mass institutionalized violence. Colebrook in 16, the idea that humanity makes its own history and so the backdrop of their soul conscious evolution deeply linked in modernity were accustomed to thinking in humans having emerged from the primordial to darkness and infinite entities living and acting in separate physical world in the world. We plot a mind built on more over nonetheless has been independently existing, investing the understanding of the autonomy of humans for nature runs deep in modernity, thinking we would believe that the rational creature risen from nature by independent of its great unfolding processing. And those who want to make the starting point in the Anthropocene say to colonize the 17th century are stuck in environmental science that have not matured as earth system science, where the point is not relation among humans with the earth as a complex whole. Politics that operates at the traditional level policy by way of relation among humans need to be open to the modern inclusion of human history from here on. Our history will be increasingly dominated by natural processes and influenced by largely beyond our control. Our future has become entangled with the earth's geological evolution concerning the modern space can no longer be maintained. The humans make their own history. Mark Card at history and our alternative history to refuse the pre-given question of life. The only meaningful negative critique of life can push back in violence of the shared articulation of living. Hunting Youngblood is 16. Fuck life. Whatever the articulating here is that it's important to refuse coercion, the rhetoric question of life dependent perhaps. This states is impractical to worry about the most compelling given the reason resistible seems to miss the point given calculating the advance of the instrumental and deconstructive reality, practice function, the critical interrogation, the exclusion operation in which position or established an order to mobilize the stick power servers the alternate production without rejecting the stick power tell the negative critique. If it pushes life and time bring back the meaning and tries to again. Of life and tries being against life rather than simply being critical as a rethinking of a political position, the point of the view of negation, personality, and animal alerts us to the danger that are inherent in the affirmation of life, regardless of how contested the the point of non-identified the definition of society. So radical that requires a withdrawal of the relationality, self-withdrawal, relationality, run counter to the humanistic impulsive to motivate the implicit violation of life and negative critique of life and emphasizes non-redemption of life and self-indicate rather than advocating its cautionary, albeit critical affirmation of resistance is not external but rather internal to all figures of life. Perhaps we can never be done without refusing what is presented to us, but this not mean we should choose to be against life and again case. Learn when it assumes identity as an agglomeration of experience in the history of oppression, venerating entries as a strength of practice and traps identity and shame of the past opponents in the face of these wounds, which remains as powerlessness, it becomes locked in a cycle of revenge, constructing a hostile external place. The blame is a symptom treated for Gonzaga Brown. In 93, interpolitically, and make conceivable effect of domination for the opponents and the substitute of self-affirmation, we express powerless reps. Gonzaga is rooted in reaction. Identity does not consist of an active component, but a reaction to something outside. There will be powerless slave morality, constantly reduced to give attention to the pain, the suffering of being a world, hence any attempt to escape will merely reaffirm structures of resentment. Causes suffering is created the imaginary revenge of nature. Denies the true reaction of that these achieve the imposition of suffering for what does not feel displeasure is done. Competent through the production of guilt through the establishment of suffering as the measure of social virtue and casting privilege in his own indictment and culture of suffering is portrayed to be fortunate. There is too much misery, publicity requiring is sustained rejection by hostile external politicized identity premise and exclusion and foul fueled by the suffering imposed by this opponents and the seek to generate political paralysis seeks liberation punishment is what the world calls itself a typical lie that creates a good conscience for itself defined, self-affirming action, but contemporary politicized identity for genocides not only shape the sovereign will of the liberal subjects much part subject, and to speak of survival assumes the dominant knowledge about the world while there exists blueprints for potential of the future comes at the expense of people who cannot live within the linear notions of understanding goals and await to speak of the future will conjure up uncertainty and anxiety coupled with anticipation of the future is not there mechanisms that suggest basic blueprints of eventual marriage, children, students, and all work on the perpetuating institution political way. What does that mean? To exist in a space outside, to be denied from what a person envisions loneliness and exclusion to behaviors are deviating from the social assumption that health and future are inherently valuable and that survival is fundamentally desired and active way and simply to life for social dot plunging.
Mark that, sir.
The act does nothing about modes of social control and maintain white supremacy and adapt to policies. Alexander says most Americans can look back and see slavery and Jim Crow laws and moral forms of social contract, price of brag, and relative to the new form of social contract designs of mass incarceration and people of color story because of federal its evolving methods of maintaining white supremacy. Although American men comprise less than 7% of the population, they comprise half the population, prison population on. Out of 3 African American men is either in prison or probation on parole lesson. Latinos are not far behind the war on drugs as most damaging manifestations to the communities of mass incarceration comprise white. Leads to social bias by segregating, incarcerating, rendering unemployable huge segments of the black and the brown population, denying blacks an equal and adequate education, barring them from certain forms of employment and regulating them to the worst neighborhoods. The whites elites have ensured that whites will never occupy the bottom rung. That hierarchy, the new form of the social control spending trace the social political life and structure mass incarceration is predicated on the inferior of a certain class of people don't like to find large number rights. The genius of the new system is heavily blames the victim black American are segregated strips of political rights and use for economic benefit or proprietary rights because they chose to engage in criminal behavior in the ass narrative describing injuries with the past no guide to the future. This reinforces exclusion for closes social justice Bahambra and 10 the reification of political sides and limited attachments becomes over-invested zone in historical suffering perpetuates its injury with identity focused on experience exclusion. Exclusion becomes pervasive valor rights contains identity group activity operates to reproduce that injury created by injury in opposition to resolving social relations generate that identity to extend the identity associated with historical into the future is already determined by the injury. Market injury.
Alright, skip the doc out. Sure. We good?
Mm-hmm.
On framework, if you don't define what GHG emissions are, what are they?
Things like CO2 emissions and
things like CO2 emissions.
I have a question. What is the interpretation mandate that we do?
A firm policy that restricts greenhouse gas emissions, meaning the emissions that contribute to global warming, the 6 defined by the
Sure, you're and on 89 piece evidence talks about like the restriction and production of milk. Like, why is that a good, like, I guess, definition for what restrictive processes would be in terms of like the one you see, or even policy writ large?
And the intent to define the word restrict is in that card. It doesn't matter what they're
It's
restricting.
like sure it's
Okay,
a different
that's fine.
court case.
Let's
but
talk about
yeah.
the critique. What's the link?
Yeah. Do you want?
So I think there's a couple of links.
What
I
are
think
they?
first is the affirmatives focus on the standpoint experience of like lived experience is something that reifies a politics of
Sure,
humanism.
so when we read at the bottom of the 1AC that survival is beyond the persistence of the body, that life and death are rather kind of like not the litmuses for experience, how does that apply to lived experiences only? Like such as Audre Lorde and June Jordan, that even in death, they are chased down by power.
Yeah, the argument is that the way you've oriented the politics of the 1AC is that which is already grounded in the same humanisms that you attempted, that Audre
How?
Lorde and
What
June
did
Jordan.
you-
I have a question. What is
Sure.
humanism? And how is that like, okay, yeah, what is humanism?
Humanism is a politics that focuses on is human-centered.
What is the human?
Yeah.
Is really, I guess, what I'm asking. What
In
is
the
human?
so in the context of the criticism, it makes the argument that the human currently has two conceptions within the dialectics, the affirmative approaches, a capital H and a small h human. These small h humans are those who are still the same species of Homo sapien, but are excluded from the category of human, and
What
capital
about,
H
like,
human is the
racial,
white, heterosexual, patriarchal, able-bodied.
That's fine.
Okay, the Cold 16 evidence says that we think of humans as emerging from primordial darkness, as independent entities living outside of the, I guess, political world. Where does the 1AC do this?
Our argument isn't that the 1AC do that.
That's what Picard says, that you don't
Our
have
argument is that that's how the status quo is structured.
But that's the
that's the
status
concept of the
quo is my
efforts.
argument. How is it the 1AC? How is it our
Argument is
concept
the
of
1AC
humanity?
Yeah, our argument is that the 1AC still partakes in those same politics that assume those kind of things are true. The Anthropocene has posed an
How?
existential question about the way humans should relate to nature.
How?
We
Wait,
say you
how
have not
does the F
taken
do
up
that? How does
question
the F do that?
by not taking up the question of how humans exist within nature.
Sure. I have a question. Is in the world of the Anthropocene, trying to reclaim it or redeem it, is that bad? Or, like,
What do you mean by
to
claim or
keep
redeem?
survival, for the human to survive in the current world, is that bad?
We think it's probably irrelevant. It is human-centered. The
Sure.
question of
So
just
then,
human
sure.
survival is a bad
Sure,
question
so
to
then
ask.
your goals card that you read on case says, these behaviors are deemed from the social consumption that health and future are inherently valuable, and the goal of survival is fundamentally good and right and desired.
I don't mean.
How does that
No
I'm
problem.
sending. That's fine. Yeah, just emailing. Oh, my mouse is
Okay, what's your order?
It's gonna go case framework frequency. world through which I travel, I'm endlessly recreating myself, and this is how you should think about the affirmative. There are processes that are constantly reproducing the narrative of capitalist settlement through and for black and red people. That means being pushed out of linear time into polluted spaces of death and non-being in order to clear the way for the settler and settlement to gain spatial coordinates and movement. These processes are uniquely reproduced through the black mother's denial of motherhood is produced and reproduced through the instrumentalization of life. Gums gives the example of children being torn from their mothers during ecological crises like Katrina's reproduction of slave children being sold to further facilitate captivity. Using the wind as our teacher to understand how these processes create events that mirror each other across time and space. The one is he rereads motherhood as mothering through a pedagogy of survival that says fuck all the bullshit, we can live anyway because we're enough, we can mother ourselves and each other, we're the basis of life as a form of resistance, and doesn't read survival as just biological or material means, but reinscribes it with the power of elements which breaks the production of blackness. As abject is produced through the mother of black, produced through the figure of the black mother. The symbolic exchange of her labor precedes violence as immaterial and constitutes the world through a criminal presence. Scum 2010 commodities gain value not because of their usefulness as objects, but because they serve the needs of exchange. Superfluity is the hinge of his fantasy that produces value without usefulness. Superfluity demonstrates how black life can be expendable while black life remains crucial to the perpetuation of a security state designed to dispense with black life of value that cannot be used in the criminal chase that not only exceeds but precedes materiality. The criminality of black survival is a crucial locus for our examination of biopolitics and narrative balance and survival of blackness, both in terms of population and sex, or remains from black mothering, inclusivity of the biological and domestic reproductive labor of black mothers, but also in motor survival that refines productivity or productivity is not dangerous because it produces the arrival and criminal presence is the site of perpetuation of racism in the post-racial state operates the very set of production of black life. The production of blackness is characterized, criminalized, and demonized through the figure of the black mother. The biopolitical link between what the memory describes as the individual body, the microwork of the racial body, of the populist narrative function of black reproductivity in the fear and fantasy of the racialized state. My country needs me, and if I were not here, I would have to be invented. Black women serve as a lesson in objectification. The marked maternal body is crucial to the fantasy that different lives have inherently different worth. It constitutes a site in which intervene the grammatical reinscription of expendability of black flesh mothering using the modifiers queer and black in order to disrupt the normative incorporation of mothering into the narrative of patriarchal family. The criminalization of black motherhood is constructed in its threat comes before that criminalization, reminding us the queer possibility of the narrative pathology struggles to foreclose the focus on black queer maternal enables the production of an intersubjective future that does not reproduce ownership through the bodies, but rather reimagines a connection and accountability of the production of a liberal world. I'm going to answer the Brown evidence is a turn. We turn this argument. This is identities that are assigned to our bodies. Our argument is that we should reread these types of things that are assigned to our bodies in a way that is beneficial for us, and that we can create a form of queer kinship that breaks outside of those identity categories. I'm going to group the rest of their arguments. We critique linear time. That was above with. So this is not survival in a biological sense, but one that is always already. When I am speaking, all the indigenous women before me are speaking through me. That it does not end when they have physically died. Now, all of these arguments turn the critique and assumes that surviving in the physical sense is good, which turns their anthropocentrism. The idea that we need to survive beyond the Anthropocene is bad. I'm going to go to the critique. Or go to the framework, sorry. Your interpretation is focused on the buildings in the city instead of what is impacted by the polluted air surrounding it. Our interpretation is the emphasis of the resolution should be on the climate change policy in terms of emissions, not the USFG restrictions, y'all. On some Cartesian mind-body duality fuck shit that assumes that y'all's ideas are objective instead of being tied to your bodies as settlers. That's our fixed flux argument that y'all have to exile black and red bodies from the space into the two polluted spaces is to assume indigeneity or rightful ownership over debate, but the F is an epistemological prior to how we understand the topic and turn to your limits argument. A spatial temporal understanding of the topic reveals that we inhabit the geographical portion of the topic that y'all have never walked through because you deem it uneducational or lifeless. There's not a right or wrong way to interpret the topic, but the reason why you see us always trying to argue reasonability and compromise, but y'all always reading framework is because it's an attempt to maintain that segregation. A focus on restrictions of greenhouse gases can only result in destruction and pollution for red and black space. You assume that restrictions somehow don't result in fucked up shit for red and black people, but we're making arguments about whose bodies and voices matter in what context. Take the DAPL, for example, about how when they asked white people if they could put that through their neighborhoods, they said no, and so they moved it to sacred burial lands, and now indigenous people are saying no, which means that they get attacked by dogs and arrested. Portable skills mean nothing when our portable skills means that we get to use the shit that we talk about here in real life, but I don't understand how their fucking interpretation does anything for me and Jasmine. Now, your interpretation is doublespeak bullshit that sustains settler kinship and obliterates black and red life. It's Guns 2010. The politics of language is the matter of survival in a world dominated by white terms, but the survival said double-edged fluency and waiting English cost. These societies society as a whole, something that cannot bring back a world dominated by white terms is not sustainable or livable world for anyone, and therefore survival requires its own definition. Jordan soon associates white language with a political doublespeak that means exactly the opposite of what it says, using the example of U.S. imperialism war and the terms carpet bombing and defoliation used to obscure the burying of human beings in Vietnam, and the Nixon description of its domestic policy is one of the compassion, concern, and social progress at home, where social programs and federal aid to public housing and schools are cut in. Since that's what our compassion means in white English, I do not think any child should learn that English prior to participating in such a debasement of this means to human community. Access to white English is contrary to human survival because it masks violence. We have entered the world of double-speak bullshit, and our lives may be soon lost behind that entry. It's about political and economic process of consent to sacrifice the majority of population to the interests of corporations. Now, like the afterlife of slavery, black and brown women are assimilated into the white household as mammies and nannies. You have attempted to assimilate us into your model of debate through the narrative of the motherhood, which reproduces capitalist and dead future. We reject that. We read your language in order to survive. Gums 2010, we are worth wanting each other. Queer refers to the calling into question co-constitutive narratives of white supremacist heteropatriarchal capitalism by demonstrating that something else is possible and desirable in a relationship to each other. Language has to be appropriate and transformed in order to pervert the grammar book. Narrating black women to trap availability can be read as a critique in the wide-reaching empiricism and higher ranking of English language. The black women are challenged to speak to each other in a variety of colonizing languages. Further impetus to create a language based on the survival skills of salvaging, borrowing into responsive mode of production, in which difference produces the capacity for accountability. Who will not turn away mother and becomes the technology for relationship and speakability with indifference. The key role of depathologized black mother in the narrative justification of economic eugenetic and state violence. Of course, the term mother, and to the extent that it ruptures the term mother, is split into at least two functions: the literal labor of social reproduction of the omniclass and the continued reproduction of expendable otherness, and reproduces a social relation in which life is differentially valued. We can learn to mother ourselves rather than the disrupted status of the term mother, the coherent carrier for patriarchal social values, in which the constructed oxymoron of black mothering and the racist social narrative has already destabilized towards the use of the character of the black mother as a hinge of the first, the production of people as property, and the second, the production of the state as a social contract. Now I'm going to go to the critique. I think that this argument assumes there is the fucking F, but we do it better. I'm going to make a whiteness dissad that your discursive resistance against whiteness is nothing more than a disembodied intellectualism, an anti-gesture that only represents a politics of declaration that only reproduces the narcissism of the white subject and forces itself into the center of political and academic struggles that cannot produce an ethical relationship to the world. On 4, we might assume that if we are doing critical whiteness studies, we can protect ourselves from doing the wrong kind of studies of language we think of as critical, and these lend themselves to the very techniques of the governments we critique. The embrace of the critical, the cooperative would be the way of framing the story that assumes that we were innocent and critical until we got misused, and reminds us of the transformation of the critical into property as something we have to do. Allows the critical to become the performance indicator. Whiteness gets reproduced or being declared as part of the broader strip towards what we could call a politics of declaration, which institutes the individuals that admits who forms a bad practice, in which the admission itself becomes seen as good practice, admitting to one's own racism when the declaration is assumed to be evidence of the anti-racist commitment. Does not do what it says, putting whiteness in the speech of the object that is spoken about as the anti-racist action, nor does it necessarily commit a state or institution or person to a form of action we could describe as anti-racist, declaring one's whiteness even as part of the project of social critique and reproduce white privilege in ways that are unforeseen. Now, this can be the net benefit to the permutation. Do both. I think the app picks up where they leave off. They want to deconstruct the human, but that assumes but our question is, who is the human in the first place? Our argument is that you have removed yourself from your subjectivity and performed the clearing in this debate, because I think this is our king argument in the 1AC, in that red and black space is constructed through the triad, right? There is the settler who maintains a stable human subject. We disrupt that through forging a way for red and black people to be in the world. They also have not really answered the question of what is humanism. I think that only white people, this assumes an agency in which red and black people can actually access humanist politics. We don't have a way of actualizing that into the world. I think that the DAPL example on framework and it can be an example of that. Also, there's a contradiction. Framework requires us to act on GHG. The critique says that, or greenhouse gases, the critique says that we should live through it. I think that's a contradiction that performs the clearing. You are allowed to contradict yourself because you have removed yourself from your settler position. That's also links to humanism. That's the king stuff above. Only the settler is able to contradict themselves because they control time and space in the way that meaning is created through the criminalization of the black mother. That was on case. And there's 6:30. That's all good.
You make this whiteness dissad that Sam and I in this debate are attempting to evacuate our subject position as settlers. What race am I?
Our argument is that you are performing whiteness, right? You have removed yourself and think that humanism can critique itself. I would say that yes, you visibly look white. You may be a white passing person of color, but that does not mean that you cannot perform whiteness in this debate.
Okay.
let's talk first.
There's a difference
on,
clearly between a brown Latino like me and
Okay.
like white Latinos in debate too. Like,
Let's talk about the interpretation stuff on framework. How is defending a policy that reduces greenhouse gas emissions causing harm to people of color?
I'm sorry, wait, what?
Why would we take,
Our argument
yeah.
is that we cannot access that, like that discussion, because our voice, because of the way that like settlerism is like, or like violence is spatialized, that like we can never access that policy discussion. That was the DAPL example. When we ask the government like do something about this shit, they arrest us and shoot us and do all that things because of the way that meaning is constructed through the criminalization of black life.
Okay, so things like the Clean Air Act that have cleaned the
I mean,
air.
if you want to ask about those questions, you can, but I would not if I were you. Like, we come from Norman, where like our water supply has not met the Clean Water Act for like decades. We come
so
from
why,
places
why
where
isn't
our
your
clean
act
air.
that think places like Norman do that and
Huh?
meet the clean water supply?
It
Why-
provides us a way to be in the world, right? Like, our argument is that that violence will continually happen because of the way we cannot access political change,
Okay,
but
so-
that we
so
can
the
still
1AC
be.
When Joe signs the ballot affirmative, what does that do to address these issues?
It doesn't.
This goes
It's
back-
not about Joe. It's about us because we wanted to say it in the fucking first place. We want to be in this space.
Okay, so the affirmative does not resolve climate change in any way, shape, or form.
What? How is that connected to the question you just asked?
The
Our argument is
question I
that
asked
we
is
will
what does-
live through
My
the
question
climate
is, what
change
does the 1AC
impacts.
do to address climate change?
Yes, we live through. Yeah, you can answer.
Yeah, this goes back to cross-text questioning what of like what does the affirmative produce? We
Yeah.
think that it is not the responsibility of like the black woman to produce an alternative world for
We have
whiteness to
created
fill
a
in.
disadd to production, right? Like, our argument is that we are always required to produce strategies because we occupy the position
Okay.
of the mammy and the nanny,
That's fine.
right?
The critique, permutation to both, what does that look like? What is the world of the permutation?
We think like the app is a rejection of humanism, right? Like red and black people are not the human, right? We are like the human is a racialized like
Sure.
being.
I guess I'm just asking, like, what is the
I
perm,
don't know.
what is the perm text, I guess, is my
Do
question.
both. Because y'all are gonna like do some more link analysis and shit in the block, and we're gonna say some
Okay.
shit depending on
We
what
just
they
think
are.
there's a link.
Yeah, there's like a link.
You have 854, bro.
Can I ask two clarification questions real quick? First, what was the counter interp on T?
The focus should be on emissions, not on the restrictions by the government.
Okay. 311. Except that. Alright, the doc should be sent out. The order is going to be topicality and then decay.
Topicality number 2.
Yeah. Sam, do you mind if I put this in a little bit?
Yeah, it's 311.
Yeah.
Is there an overview and framework or a team?
There's like a tiny overview of team. Cool. Is everyone good to go? First on team, no we meet argument. They assume that the argument is about the content of the 1AC, not the form. That means that should filter all their offensive arguments because we're not about what the form of the 1AC should be, but about the content. The content should be about how we can address greenhouse gas emissions and reduce them to the status quo onto the line by line. And they're first on their counter-interpretation that we need to address emissions, focus on just emissions insufficient to ensure things like predictive class and address global warming. They can talk about anything that gets them in the status quo you should prefer because there's no counter-interpretation or cross-explanation of what greenhouse gas emissions are, as in the 6 greenhouse gases which majorly contribute to the global warming and atmosphere pushing the status quo, which means they deny the ability for us to engage predictive clash about the 1AC and engage in testing about the policy by which we could reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now they make an argument that we are a form of objectivity, however we don't assume objective understandings are necessary. Our argument is that you can use your subjectivity to influence greenhouse gas emission reduction policies. We'll do that a little bit more in terms of the voice of matter answers. They say the app is power, however the app should influence the way politics operates. That's our argument. Our argument is just about the content of the 1AC. Now they say we didn't want education, however our argument isn't that they're uneducational. Our argument is that they're undebatable in the status quo because they haven't made an argument about how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is the debate we prepared for in the context of things like the criticism or things like the Honda said, determining how electricity prices influence minority communities or unnecessary questions about our greenhouse gas emission reduction policies are implemented in the status quo. They say they're a form of compromise, however they're not a compromise. We had to go through cross-sects of the 1AC to even get how they address emissions in the status quo, and even then it wasn't addressing greenhouse gas emissions, however emissions of negativity emitted by white people in terms of the way spaces are created. They say that it's a question of who voices matter, but you can do emission reduction policy while still maintaining your subjectivity. Look, for example, at Rutgers app, which addresses the trucking industry and the smog creates in the Port of Newark, or Stanford's app, which implements a carbon tax on white people to generate a reparative strategy, and student up understanding the intricacies of GHG regulation can influence federal policy. UC Santa Barbara approves. Hall 16. A group of UC Santa Barbara when proposals during 16 public comment period. They ended up shaping well, better policy, the government listed the TPP for trade algorithm proposal which reduced the vehicle changes adoption curve model didn't see that out ever taking into account the comments of the feds acknowledged there and the numbers that they're to be responsive to those seemingly arcane rules affect every American. That's why they're important. People know about them. The UCSB team, so those possible to influence crucial aspect of public policy. You make things about a certain area, learn about it, and you can actually make a difference. And they make the argument, however, that this doesn't lead to portable skills. However, our argument is necessary. Our argument is that portable skills in this debate are good because we can address the real issues that are facing them. The narrative of the 1AC talks about how things like Hurricane Katrina occurred only by discussing and using their subjectivity to influence things like environmental planning policies. Can we address the way that the response to Hurricane Katrina was fundamentally racist and heteronormative? Now they make this double speak argument. However, we have a disad to their terms of survival, their own survival, and so you should extend a piece of client evidence that indicates that in the global north we have an ethical obligation to address the way the greenhouse gas emissions have influenced not only the global north but the global south. Their app does nothing to do things like address the way that droughts and the lack of monsoons are affecting India, or the fact that Madagascar and South Africa may no longer exist in 10 to 20 years due to rising sea levels, their survival strategy allows those people to go dying. We think you have an ethical priority according to the client evidence to address those emission policy. Finally, they make an argument that we attempt to assimilate them. However, we are attempt to assimilate them. I think the frame argument I did above is sufficient to answer this. We aren't making an argument about the form of the 1AC, just that the content should address greenhouse gas emission reduction policies. K. I guess it's time to overview. The criticism makes the argument that the affirmative, despite trying to be revolutionary, radical, and ensure the survival in terms of black motherhood, doesn't actually do that. Instead, they replicate the humanisms of the status quo. The alternative is to fuck life. Our hunting young blood evidence indicates that this evacuates the question of whether or not we should focus on life in the first place. We make the argument that the 1AC posits life as something that is inherently valuable through various arguments that I'll cover in terms of the permutation and link debate. First, they make this whiteness diss out about the politics declaration. However, our first argument against this is that they assume the types of politics that address, for example, me, and they assume that I am white passing, that this means I can advocate my cellular relationship. They ignore the fact that not only am I German, but I am also Native American, I am Hungarian Romney, and I am Israeli American. This means that they can't get access to a lot of their humanism corporality arguments, and also shows that their relation to the past can actually be severed. They severed my relation to my own past by assuming that I am white, attempting to advocate my cellular relationship, which proves that the world is far more complex than the affirmative can ever realize, and that serves independently to the criticism. Also, the alternative is necessary step towards addressing race and class foundation, the advocacy theorization, particularly from the perspective of privilege, Kinzinger in last 16. What we're trying to address in the paper is follow the other attempts to address the lack of political lack of perceived by the humanities, social sciences, and neurosciences formulation and perceive this. These attempts to see relation critical to the capital scene. The thing is having these social sciences humanities have been sold specifically for ground race, class foundation, economic, social, exploitation, like geography, territory, this scene, colonial connection missing in the organization, and section to call it 2015 World Geographical Study Institute, British Geography Anthropocene themed annual conference, and is further reflecting the knowledge about the Anthropocene as well as the proposed existing methods for the intervention with the following proposition. We contend that while the caught in the spectacle not see the Anthropocene stacks are in the feedback losers and social science debates on and so on and critical besides fact global environmental change are not having the same area than the same consequences around the world. We want to focus on Bell Hooks and Pierce White supremacist capitalist picture of climate change. At the same time, we want to consider the possibility of thinking and behaving differently, and so the contrary the Anthropocene doesn't make another impermeable barrier and becoming otherwise we're done. So from the position of our privileged subjectivity, we aim to identify more white and privileged audience with the problems of the entail market after entails, and our move toward decolonizing the Anthropocene is a product for listening to people of color and taking part of our discussion about the reimagination of the non-human Kinzinger in last 16. The Anthropocene need to be decolonized if Anthropocene discourses as realistically considered the human gene culture geographies, and we hope that the race, gender, and class dimension are forefront debate first. Shut up and listen and do so without defense of folks who are white need to listen up. Particularly no defending whiteness when people who speak about racism. This means white and privileged activities. Stop using defense sorry for being white and privileged argument. Take another argument so anger is crucial for academics to the importance of self-determination, self-representation, act, and solidarity. Second to ask question in particular participating in the reimagination of human non-human interactions. Western academics have to consider the continuation of the European model of humanity hierarchy of the planet inhabitants is really going to help the present threats to all life, who is currently defined as non-humans, and what it is important to become aware of what's happening globally in terms of change of parameters. For instance, Bolivia passing law of Mother Earth, or New Zealand legally recognizing the sentience of animal species market after animal species. Now, they make their argument permutation to do both. However, permutation to do both doesn't make sense because you can't combine the narrative with 1AC with the rejection of the basis of life as a starting point for debate. Their entire narrative with 1AC is about how the lives are impacted by things like Hurricane Katrina, global warming, as well as their relationship to God. There are a couple of independent links based on the 1AC that serves this. At first, the F posits in cross-examination that negative energies are only created by white people. This ignores things like entropy that occurs within nature itself that also influences things like Hurricane Katrina. Our Anthropocene argument according to Claire book is that the Earth has become sick as a result of human interaction. The Earth has become sick as a result of human interaction and is acting as reacting as if it had a cold, which proves that their negative energies argument ignores as inherently human centered. Next, they say it's a matter of intergenerational storytelling narrative, making that ignore. This ignores the role nature has played as human centered. They could have endorsed things like an Ubuntu philosophy from Africa, which acknowledges the interconnectedness of all things. However, the 1AC doesn't do that. They only assume that storytelling is something intrinsic to the human next. Their association with God poses the question of what we should do in balance in the godly dialectic that's always ready. A form of humanism. Now, the first piece of Colbert evidence indicates that their theory of praxis of politics is humanism because the 1AC assumes the standpoint of queer black survival lives posits the human as the center of relation. The second piece of Colbert evidence says that their history arguments assume that humanity is unique. The final piece of Colbert evidence about the relation between race and sex indicates that the way that race and sex occur with individuals isn't just a question of human human qua, human interaction, human qua, environment interaction. Now we have a green arithmetic to add to the permutation 416. Doesn't require the problem there, fundamental thing that brought us biosphere and transition. Let's have a world category society nature from the problem no less binaries of Eurocentrism, racism, sexism, nation, society directly implicating modern roles, class violence, inequality, and oppression, the abstract nature society historically for seeing that as serious human exclusion, never mind rationalizing this one, the extreme policy, and proposing actually human nature, the exclusion, of course, my long history supporting women, colonial population, people who color average, insanity, and egalitarian, broadly stable fashion would be semi-solo, radical, political magic, captive in nation society, market after nature society, and reductionism to sad Lynch and Stretsky 14. Human frame reference to historically created reduction in the direction of the vast contextual connection embeddedness is probably because not only that's important frames of reference which totally disappear from the consideration majority research and anthropogenically situated frame of reference for focuses on the human social frame of reference as most important than large frame of reference and as the only frame of reference legitimate as necessary began with environmental frame of reference and environmental frame of reference is entirely different from the anthropogenic centered social frame of in economic sociology, criminology, social science, the environmental which is a distinct, unique, independent area for investigation, the frame and subframe overlapping way the anthropogenic center orientation promotes what view this anthropogenic center orientation with setting up the frame subframe reference connection and importance. Sam, you're gonna have to take some arguments. I'll write them out for you. Cross-X.
How does being Hungarian get you shot by the police?
My argument isn't that things like being Hungarian get me shot by the police, but you're papering over my history proves that your intergenerational history argument doesn't
hold
make
on.
sense.
Our argument is that the racialization of our bodies in terms of space is what gets us fucking shot. How does being Hungarian, how does that turn our argument if being Hungarian doesn't fucking get you shot?
It turns the argument in the sense of the way that we can sever history from peoples. Not in the sense of the way that society acts upon me. Like, I agree, white passing affords me unique privileges, but the argument that because I'm white passing, I must therefore be white papers over intergenerational histories that you're attempting to affirm.
I'm sorry, what? Hold on, say that again. What?
Okay, my argument
We
is
have
that
assigned
you
whiteness
have
to you
double
because you're Hungarian, like...
You have assigned
You don't
whiteness
have
to
any
me because
material
of my
fucking,
passing.
like... Okay, one, like, Hungarians are not fucking white in a U.S. context? Is that... what?
No, my argument is that I'm Hungarian Romani, which ironically is probably the most hated group in all of Europe. Like, it
What does
really
that mean in
shitty
a U.S.
crap.
context? Our argument is about the U.S.
We have criticized the basis of the criticism as well as the Klein evidence criticized as being in only solely a U.S. context, which means you've just given me another link to the criticism.
So, like, the way that, like, spatialization happens in Europe is the same. The way that indigenous bodies are incarcerated by nature or, like, black people are demonized in the U.S., those are the fucking same or, like, can be equivalent?
They can be parallel. Demonization
How?
of Romani people.
Wait, how?
Demonization of Romani people in Europe. For example, the Germans have created a police force that uniquely targets all Romani people, assuming that they have stolen. It arrests them prior to them actually being able to interact with anyone.
You're answering the F. Okay, I'm gonna go to this framework
I've made
argument.
an
You have
internal
said that there is a...
argument.
You're not answering that, but it's fine. You have made the argument that, like UC Santa Barbara proves that, like, students can somehow affect change. What is this example, and where in the card does it talk about what was changed?
Yeah, it makes the argument that UC Santa Barbara students utilize their knowledge of, like, economics and sciences behind climate change to evaluate corporate average fuel economy standards that the EPA was proposing. And as a result of their knowledge, they were able to notice holes and flaws within the system. During the EPA comment period, they proposed to the EPA these comments and concerns. The EPA then, about the way that their model was flawed, their model placed unique burdens on different kinds of communities.
What changed?
The EPA then went and redid their math to rectify those burdens and cited the UC Santa Barbara students in the final
rule. The EPA also
rule.
fucking lied about drinking water in Flint. Why is the EPA good? Why is
Our argument isn't that the EPA is good. Our argument is that student engagement with the way EPA makes regulations is good.
Why?
Because we can
If
do
they
things like
fucking
UC Santa Barbara.
lie.
Because we can do things like the UC Santa Barbara students did, which is point out their lies before they become impacts. If we had scientific knowledge of the things going on in Flint before the poisoning of the water, we could have pointed it out and stopped it.
Why is that applicable to the AF about, like, specifically? What about people who aren't students? What about native and, like, black people who can't be students?
It's not necessarily about students. It's about the knowledge is created about how greenhouse gas emissions are reduced based on policy.
Yeah,
right?
I'm saying, how's that accessible to people who aren't fucking students?
Natives can also understand basic supply and demand. To say that they can is probably reductionist and links to your AF.
No, you're
Just put it at the bottom.
What's your order?
Just put it at the bottom, Sam.
Case and then
Okay.
okay. And Spence. Is anyone not right?
Let's do it.
You can start by extending the brown piece evidence. They don't have a turn to this argument. Their starting point leads to resentment because politicized identity always becomes politicized identity is premised on exclusion and fueled by suffering, which means that they don't have a method for solving things. You vote negative on presumption. They don't have a way to overcome the suffering things that they start from. They just say that these things are bad. They don't actually have a way of redressing these injury and redressing this, and that leads to resentment. Demanding social justice for historical injury codifies resentment. Lost in subordinate groups and the subordination. Brown in 95. Liberalism contains internalize and diamond on the moralizing revenge of powers of the triumph of the weak is weak, the red Zotma, inherited through a constructive paradox of liberalism. The paradox which produces failure to recriminate the subordination and guilt turns the result on the successful net between the individual and legitimate liberalism and cultural homogeneity requires the commitment to political universities, commitments to freedom verifies the fulfillment of equality promise and breeds resentment as welfare state liberalism attenuate of unmitigated license the rich and power on behalf of the disadvantaged. Conversely, commitment to equality required in every state interventionism accentuates the commitment to freedom and breeds resentment expressed as neoconservative anti-state of embracing change and reverse racism and so forth. Mark Card, fourth, and emphasis on white injustice as the starting point of the movement only serves to re-entrench black identity and powerlessness, attaching identity to the source that socially denies identity, reproduces resentment and blankets the hierarchy of violence to in 11. For non-processed whereby a mix of envy and hatred resulting deep sense of inferiority, Rex Hecker and black psyche and the slave, like his or her own self-concept in much of the West are turning around and turning equally in the gain, access to oppress the whiteness or regulate self-confidence by celebrating his or her race. Black subjects apparently caught in the trap that resents on the contrast, the master self-centered worldview in which goodness is synonymous with excellence, converting the oppressive power unable to access the privileges to save, secular enemies hostility, which Nietzsche calls precisely resentment and creates a morality based on compassion, resentment, and meekness, which reverses the master rise insidiously instilled in the latter loads them with guilt, causing them to relinquish power, eventually allowing the rise of the weak. This moral schema seems to be analogous with the colonialized relationship in which the latter opposed the moralizing discourse, victimization, and or self-negation. The rise of the weak is not the end of the story. The discursive strategies of the subaltern are appropriated by the dominator not only to atone for but to act as a cover for his or her domination. Mark Card, domination and the Whitey's movement is moralizing powerless. They replicate the founding structures for hierarchy of domination and recreates violence. Brown in 95. The morality emerges from powerlessness to avenge their incapacity for action and acts of resentment strength they cannot measure over through a codification, domination, moralizes, or critique of a certain kind of power and complaint against strength to shame and discredit domination by securing the ground in which true and good judgment morality itself becomes a power and weapon. Power becomes a weakness and resentment fashion the culture whose values and ambition mirror the predominance of the motion motivating force that extends to the power through its cultivation of reason, imaginary reason, the true reaction of deeds because resentment reacts needs a hostile external world in order to exist at all. It preoccupies the discerning, discrediting nature of what seems to undercut and extend the gold piece of evidence. Linear time is necessarily straight, and they're called to some sort of future or some sort of survival. Like their last piece of gums evidence comes at the expense of queer bodies, whether it's the gay man with AIDS that has a week to live, the homeless person who has to find food for the night, or the queer woman that doesn't want to reproduce. The people exist in a form of time that is not future-based, but rather they live in the present, a form of coincidental time that necessarily cannot be focused on survival in the future because it means that the Wednesday's call for survival-oriented politics necessarily comes at the expense of these bodies who will inevitably fail. The fear of these queer notion to understand manifests itself in civil society to assimilate or exclude queer bodies that don't fit into the dominant mode of the thought which moves the queer potential of these bodies results in inevitable unending violence. There's a couple links to this argument. They don't actually address linear time. The last piece of Gum's evidence is it has two lines in particular. First, the survival is you have to pass on notions of survival, but these notions of survival that are anti-queer in the first place, as well as the second link, which is that survival is performed, but the queer body can't provide survival because it's always already excluded, and focus on the survival already excludes the queer body because when we look to a future oriented, when we look at concepts of survival, that means that the queer bodies are necessarily eliminated. They can see the Alexander piece of the card basically functions as an alternative cause of the affirmative is the reason why they can't solve. They don't address the immoral forms of social control such as mass incarceration, war on drugs, or federalists, and they allow for new Jim Crow laws to fill in, which means you go negative on presumption because they don't have a way to resolve this in the ass. Starting point offers no guide for solvency, and that's the bottom of piece of evidence. Their rejection of the past is not a solution for the present, which means that they're not able to resolve the impacts that they bring up. Their strategy to use past injustices to reclaim identity from the colonized space causes self-deprecation and fails, breeding resentment. 2 and 13, the real problem exists in reconceptualizing identities that have been constructed in the narrative of the white man as the undue colonial difference cannot be undone. Cross-culturalization occurred from the European contract with the Latin American and African societies and results in the shaping of modern indigenous society encounter to reclaim creating countercultural identities in futile in the sense there will always be gaps that cannot be undone since many civilizations such as China, the Caribbean, work literally. The problem is not that it cannot be undone, that there will always be the sense that oppose such a movement, that move march a serious stance that is all young concerned, including ourselves, and go to the creed. Just at the top.
Just reach it, man.
They say who is human in the asked question. We have criticized the fundamental thesis they hunt, and Youngblood alternative evidence says that the question of inclusion in humanity is the wrong starting point. We have already defined humanism in social sciences like the F, which focus on the species Homo sapien. All of our links prove that while they may disrupt the human subject, they don't disrupt the way ecology is excluded. They make a contradiction. Argument, but this proves our key argument means that we meet the negative verdict on two levels. One, we have proven the topic bad and the critique of the basic the question of the resolution purpose. Second, we have proven that the affirmative is bad. It relies on human discourse and attempt to critique in the ass. Dialogue is problematic. The singular model creates a different racist differences tied to humanist vision. Progress returns itself. Co-workers may be worth questioning while the anthropocene is not. And then men which are not demand one either accept the general combination of the man and blame. Specific model like man, the history attributed to colonialism, patriarchy, in which case man conversion the innocent animal is new humanity. If we accept the Anthropocene premise that man in general is responsible, we accept something like the human as such and ignore the subtleties of history, culture, and difference in one aspect of man responsible, then it allows for space outside the guilty and one generates the human.
You have 10 minutes prep.
Yeah.
Do it like after like you can do it like with this stuff. Just like cross plan, contradiction. Part of it. Like fixed models. Like how before you contradict the impact of the they also return huh? No, I just been like you gotta prove. Yeah, I just been like, yeah. Alright. What else do you need to do anything?
framework, and then the critique. Real good? The one is to take the stance on the notion that we're a part of a process of endless recreation of ourselves, which is a process of which is an answer to the ways in which blackness is always pushed out of linear time, that we're always posed to interpolation of ways in which these narratives speak for our existence or create the ways in which reality presupposes itself. This now is answering their brown politicization argument. This is the question for the agent's relationship to those things that it produces. Now they can see the fact that we turn Brown's argument because it's a kind of rereading for the ways in which our bodies are over-coded in the first place, i.e. the criminalization that is flat conceded that the symbolic exchange of black mother is not about the idea of the commodity itself having rather the effective exchange that it produces for the human to presuppose itself on what is valuable, what is human, what is property in the first place, what is an attachment to your subjectivity. Now this is kind of seen as a reason why you should focus on the kind of endless recreation of survival. Now survival is not the idea of persistence of the body, but rather is a question, is a pedagogy that is secret and forbidden. Nowhere in the entirety of the 1AC or in the 2AC do we articulate a strategy or over-politicize what it means for intergender practices to be in, and rather say is a question where we do not, which we endorse the intergender practices of understanding what Jude Jordan, Dr. Lord Ezel do us speak. We speak as the premise of that we that were never meant to survive in the present. We do not sever ourselves from the possibility or from the past, but rather say that questions of future, present, and past are interconnected. That the blackness as a suspension cannot be identified absent or outside of these things. Let's go to framework. Now, you have conceded that your interpretation is about the buildings and the cities, concedes the king argument of spatialization because one, that we say that their shift in stratification allows for you to create a neutral space, the site of the clearing on which you're able to separate yourself, or i.e. the content from the form of the body. We say this is part of a Cartesian dualism, which you're able to create a kind of indigenization of yourself that is not new knowledge, rather an interpolation of knowledge that has already been constructed by black space. They say that focus on content and form. I already answered that, but now they say that the focus on missions. However, your interpretation of the 1MC and the 2R is kind of shifty in the fact that you say we have to reduce in GHG emissions. We approve that we are a reduction in emissions because the question for the ways in which energy is always negative for the ways in which blackness and fills space is that we are the best interaction with the environment, the best interaction for water reduction policy looks like. That the counter interpretation says that your interpretation is tethered on the policy, which is misunderstanding the way in which how energy operates. That there are racial segregations for the ways in which we locate power in certain dispossessed spaces. Blackness is a precursor to space, i.e. you can identify where this energy or where policy proposals will materialize themselves. This is an example of the DABL explanation in the 2AC that the government asked white communities, can we put this through your community? They said no, and there was a listening, there was a type of affirmation that white spaces are preferably more valuable. There's no answer to this in the 2AC or in the 1R. Means that this type of disposability is inevitable. Now the next argument, their next argument is this Hall students that policy. Howard quote, it says if you know something about a certain area you're able to produce productive. There are reasons that there's a terminal saltiness because we do not know these areas of black, but always put them in complete dereliction of our incongruous to humans. That's our king argument. Now this goes with our performative contradiction argument, the critique that I will explain further, but they say that theorization, the ways in which we construct our understandings of the world are key to create change, but then they say that which is a recentering of the self and imposition of humanity as the key locus for creating a change in environmental policy. I don't think that this is a double tone with their notion that the anarchy must be moved from this notion of civil society, the notion for creating deafness to humanity, which the 1AC says. But let's go to the critique.
Wait, answer the moral obligation that we have an obligation to the self.
Oh, right. Their argument that we have a moral obligation to sell a more moral.
Mammies and nannies.
Yeah, makes us mammies and nannies. The idea of black mother is always having to produce a type of future for you. And that's what in an instance where we're always producing the effective exchange for what allows value to exist. The first one goes to the critique. Now the first article goes to the presentation to both that we are not recentering humanity, but we don't see ourselves separate from nature, but say that there's a racial segregation for the ways in which nature presupposes itself on black and native spaces. We by the division of the 1ACIE. What is survival? And a notion that we were never meant to survive. That is not limited to the locus of like pain or body, but rather kind of spiritual evaluation, the ways in which ecology, the ways in which civil society, these kind of narrative recon structure themselves. This is a conceited interpolation dissent which always opposes and enforces the idea of subjectivity in the first place. Now, yeah. There really is no link to the argument. All of their dissents assume a world which try to recenter humanity as kind of the premise for what controls climate or what controls the entropy of the environment. We say that the random chaos of nature is blackness being eradicated. We think that the articulation of the 1AC in which we reread that interpolation, reread those narratives back, and reproduce different understandings of the ways in which we are always presuppose, creates a counter, not narrative or storytelling, but counter a position that we are survived in the present, in the past, in the future. That's the half.
Okay, you have 311 remaining. You have 613 remaining.
Oh.
Order is going to be the topicality page, the case page, and then the criticism.
Key case go.
Yep. Well, does that work for case?
Put case below the K.
Oh, case at the bottom. My bad.
TK case.
Alright, is everyone good to go? You vote negative in this debate because we have proven that the affirmative will not work or do anything to change the humanism of the status quo, to reverse the dialectics that ensure that negative energies produced by white bodies are always negatively implicated on black and queer bodies that only mothering can solve. You should have a high threshold for any affirmative solvency in this debate. We are going for an old school, the resolution is bad argument. You haven't proven that the resolution is good. First on the T debate, they don't have a piece of unique offense about why the resolution is good in this debate. The only piece of offense they have is first is the performative contradiction argument. The performative contradiction argument, I think Sam does a good job of answering the 1 hour, which indicates that the argument we're going for isn't a performative contradiction, but that because the resolution is based in climate change, it's asking the wrong question, which means you vote negative because we have proven that the resolution fundamentally is the wrong thesis, which means that even an affirmation of their particular form of politics is survival, politics should not be affirmed as an affirmation of the broader resolution that they're supposed to be defending. We're not going for the T interpretation that need to be a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but you should accept the piece of client evidence as a disadd to the affirmative and a reason to vote negative independent of presumption. It indicates that because we live in the global north, where the global north has a unique role in things like industrialization, the production of steam, the computers and things we are reading off in this debate, that we should also have the same moral obligation to address things like climate change. This answers back their nanny argument. Our argument is that black, queer, feminist bodies are necessarily responsible for climate change. The answer is that we are all complicit in climate change. That assuming that black, queer, feminist bodies have no role in climate change whatsoever is the type of same humanist dialectics that the criticism links are talking about. The client evidence indicates that you have an obligation as a judge to evaluate politics that address the global north, the affirmative, or the global south, and things like how examples like given the 2NC, like how Madagascar and South Africa won't exist in 10 to 20 years, how places in India are losing access to food, and how droughts affect the global south. They don't do anything to address those forms of politics, which is a unique reason why their survival strategy politics is bad. Go to the criticism. We're not going for the alternative in this debate. You should evaluate each link as an independent reason to vote negative on presumption, as well as a disadd to the affirmative. Their survival strategies do nothing about the people who are about trying to bring. If you vote affirmative because you think you're being moral and giving them a good mode of survival, there's always the problem that this is a global issue, which is the client argument I'm talking about. They have failed to engage in on its magnitude. They're essentially saying to let them survive, but Madagascar and South Africa can drown. The first piece of Kohlberg evidence indicates that their human-to-human relation, that the theorizations of the 1AC focusing on standpoint identity of the queer black feminist is the only one who should survive, or the fact that the affirmative team is the only one who should survive is a point of human-to-human relations that necessarily always excludes the non-human. If they are correct that the black body is always considered the non-human, they have replicated those same dialectics of humanism by centering the question of the 1AC around what humans do to other humans instead of what humans do in the context of ecology. The second piece of Kohlberg evidence from the 1AC indicates that this is a conceded Lincoln case-turn argument about how race and sex are viewed in terms of a Hegelian dialectic. They reinscribe that dialectic by assuming that race and sex are something that can only be understood within human-to-human relations instead of in broader forms of ecology that determine things like melanin levels or biological sex in the first place. Because of the broader ecologies that exist, their formulation of in the 1AC cross-examination that the only thing that produces negative energies that can define a difference between white and black or queer, non-queer, or feminist and non-feminist bodies is the negative energies produced by that white heterosexual male body. Is fundamentally what we are criticizing as a human-to-human interaction that is inherently humanist. That internal link turns their entire ontology claims about how their survival strategy is good. They make an argument that this is a form of cellular contradiction for the negative, but it's not a form of cellular contradiction. You send the two pieces of Cassinger and 16 evidence I read, the 2NC that indicate that the positionality of white bodies in the context of debate is not to apologize for whiteness, but to criticize the various colonization and how the insidiousness of Eurocentrism continues to embody itself in the academy, which is a unique reason why Sam and I read this criticism going for presumption arguments about how the reify humanist binaries is a unique reason to vote negative in this debate, because we have affirmed an ability for privileged bodies to take place and affirm the dialectics that go against the negative energies normally produced by white bodies. They also make an argument that the 1NC is an imposition on a spiritual evaluation. They have conceded the Ubuntu argument that I made, which is the fact that things like Ubuntu are ways for black, queer, feminist bodies to engage in forms of global knowing that aren't just localized in terms of their survival strategy. I think this particularly tells you the way 1AC politics works, given the 1 hour piece of Kohlberg evidence, which indicates that they are diagnosed with the problem of single modality. AK queer black feminists are the only ones who are oppressed because of things like God, because of things like Hurricane Katrina. These types of nationalistic discourses erases those kinds of differences by continuing a humanist vision that attempts to just incorporate black, queer, feminist bodies back into humanism. This is also the thesis of the green arithmetic more disadd indicates that they uphold the same dualisms of capital H human versus non-capital H human that I was talking about in the cross-examination of the 1NC. Instead of engaging in the questions of nature versus society, the permutation is not a reason why they resolve these arguments, because we'll see that the permutation, like they said, doesn't actually resolve those ecologies, which is the reason why you vote negative presumption or a bunch of dissent that they reify humanism case. Sam?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the other side. Okay. The Brown evidence turns the out, not the other way around. Starting from the point of politicized identity is necessarily bad because it is always starting from the position of exclusion, and it is always already fueled by something, meaning that they only go as far as to replicate the harms of the white sea by attempting to reincorporate them in forms of humanism. Even if they weigh that this doesn't turn the app, it's a reason to vote negative presumption because they can solve for integrating the non-human in a way that allows them to be valued. The second Brown card shows that calls for justice and calls to fix the system will never work. The affirmative is unable to overcome the raison the paradox of liberalism. That's a lot of the link analysis I'm doing in terms of the Colbert evidence. I used to send the Alexander cards concede indicates that the new Jim Crow shows how things like racism, heteronormativity, and masculinity always reify themselves because no matter what the politics of white sea is, aka their survival strategy doesn't address broader forms of social control that allow them to reinstantiate themselves. The fact that they say that they don't politicize their social control is a reason you vote neg on presumption because that means they don't change forms of social control that implicate people globally in things like anti-blackness, heteronormativity, and masculinity that they attempt to criticize.
613 remaining.
Okay. or case TK.
Case TK, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to go for the contradiction at the top. I don't think that they've answered it sufficiently in this debate. They've conceded it in the block, and it proves their clearing of the space. First is the objectivity link, that their assumption that there can ever be any type of objective or neutral understanding of the way that bodies engage each other or engage the environment is the type of clearing that we're talking about. Our king evidence talks about how the clearing of the savage, the laboring on the body of the savage and pushing it into nature, literally the bones in the ground, and the way in which blacks have made fungible in order to sustain the settlement is the way in which the meaning is constructed for the settler. It allows the settler to shift, and yeah, that's our Flix-Flux argument that allows the settler to shift the meaning in order to be fluid and navigate navigate neutrality. Yes, they create meaning. Our Young's evidence at the top of the 2AC about the way in which the black mother is criminalized is about the dereliction, the rendering of the black mother as abject is the way in which it serves as it's not necessarily about the body itself or the labor that is produced by the black mother, but the symbolic construction of it is what maintains meaning, meaning that they can create any type of fucking meaning that they want out of this objective space, but that always is predicated on the rendering of the black flesh object. Now, the second is the centering of the human to understand and know the environment to create change is a contradiction with the way that they have said that we have to remove ourselves from human to human relations. I think that is also a performative contradiction in the way that they have performed the clearing of the space, because only the settler can access that fluid notion, because black and red bodies are relegated to static space. Now, even if you don't vote for that, it's a reason why they have linked to the critique and also a reason to vote affirmative, because it's the only way that through the rereading of criminalization the rereading of the criminalization of black motherhood can we break out of that criminalization and break out of humanism. I'm going to explain that in a little bit, but I think that the central question of this debate has come down to what labor do they ask us to do for other people. This is literally answers everything in the 2NR, that black mothering is rendered object through the criminalization of her flesh. That criminalization as a symbolic structure, or as a symbol, structures value, and that criminalization is the basis of all of the links that they go for. They say that you have not done anything for the global south, that you have not filled in or tried to resolve these new forms of Jim Crow that will fill in, is the type of criminalization of our beings that we are talking about, and allows them to scapegoat the problems that the settler has created in terms of climate change through consumption and scapegoated it onto our bodies. Now, the Afri reads this mothering by saying that we are enough, we are allowed to, we can learn to mother ourselves, is what breaks the criminalization of our black life, that we have survived through these things, and that is the thing that we were never meant to survive, and the fact that we fucking did is what is great about black and red life. Now, they don't understand survival. It's something that always is. It's not something that we can solve or attempt to prescribe or something that we can produce for the world. It's just a way for us to reread. We don't forward a way for us to survive. It is something that we have already done, and something that we need to reread linguistically for us to be in the world, for us to orient ourselves toward the world. Our argument is that in the status quo there is a telos of death, that is the spatial practice of exiling red and black bodies to particular spaces, like the hood, the reservation, right? The reason why the DAPL is being put through sacred burial grounds is because those spaces are seen as dead. Our argument is that we reread those spaces to understand that there is life in those spaces, and that there is enough. Now, they have not answered the agency argument, which I think answers the Alexander arguments that we have to fill in. Our argument is that we can never access that in the status quo because of the way in which black and red bodies don't matter, right? The DAPL example, when we say no, don't put that shit through our burial grounds, they don't listen to us. They stick dogs on it. It replicates violence. So the fact that they have asked us to perform that is fucked up. Now, they say this Brown argument, but I think that they're the only ones politicizing identity. On the framework argument, they say that, like, black queers aren't the only ones who oppress. Our argument is not about a static, like, identity about black queers. Our argument is about how blackness and redness is spatialized, and that different bodies inhabit those, right? And that also, like, resolves their global south argument. That applies to the global south, too. framework, the link here is that the only argument that they go for is that we are all complicit. That all complicity thing doesn't assume who gets to access politics. I'm gonna go to K. They say it's a global issue and that we just let people drown, but we talk about our own survival. Our argument is that we are always already surviving and that we don't prescribe a way to create survival because we can't fucking do that. Also, they say that it's about humans to human, not humans to ecology. That the DAPL example answers this because we can't access that type of humanity because our forms of demands don't register on the human level. Now they say that. I'm just going to answer the Ubuntu example. The concession of a political doublespeak argument is going to be hard for you to give a negative ballot because it's a question of what lives are able to express their location, subjectivity, and hegemonic spaces. The argument that Gonzaga is making here is that because of blackness as a precursor to space allows the settler to create neutral space absent of archaic violence, allows them to indigenize themselves and create theorizations of the world on top of these disposed bodies. Language becomes an echo chamber in which expression of the black mother is held down to the overcodification of her speech as something unintelligible that's conceded in symbolic flavor of exchange argument that I went for at the top. Now, example of this is at the bottom of the 2 where he says a better way to engage in the spirit is the Ubuntu, is the appropriation of that language to criminalize the way that we have performed in this debate.
Good round.
Good debate.
round.
Good debate.
Who's who?
I'm Jasmine. I'm Chloe.
Who's who over here?
I'm James.
Okay.
Do you know how long we have until
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh, 2 minutes. So I'm gonna put, like about 2 minutes.
Alright, I end up voting a affirmative in this debate. I think that the negative can win this debate very easy in the 2NR if you go just for the critique with the alternative. Because I think that one of the biggest problems that's happening with the affirmative is that you're not creating offense against their alternative proper for why we should just say that life does not matter. We should just eliminate the value within life itself, right? Like clearly your app is sort of an impact turn to it, right? Because you're saying that there needs to be survival of black and red bodies, right? And so you could be like, their alternative might work for white people to say there's no value to life, but it certainly doesn't work for the two of you, right? And so that would be a unique form of offense, because what does it mean for them to tell you that you should embrace this as the alternative and say that your lives don't matter and we should just give that, and that creates a form of offense. But that doesn't exist in this debate, right? And so when you're making arguments that you don't link and that you're an unraveling of humanism and stuff like that, and you essentially concede that humanism is bad and problematic, the alt resolves that, which means if you go for the alternative, there's no chance of them being able to solve, because there's always going to be a residual risk of the link, and that becomes a very clear 2 and R. Your 2 and R, however, you go for a little bit of everything, right? You don't go for T, but you go for part of T. You don't go for the K, but you go for part of the K. You don't go for all of the Ks, you go for part of the Ks, which spreads you out too much over each individual one. And I think the critique, given the undercoverage that happens in almost every speech, like you're getting to the K and the 2AC with like 2 minutes, 1 AR with like 130, and then 1 minute in the 2 AR again, means that like it makes it very easy for the 2 and R in my mind to be able to collapse down to just that argument. In the end, I end up voting on two basic arguments. The first is I think that the contradiction argument is not effective, it's not fully answered, because I'm not sure how, when you're still going for that evidence on the T debate that says that the global north has to act to solve the environment to help the global south, how that is not a humanist attempt for humans to try and control the environment, right? And then once I believe it's a contradiction, then that gets at all of their offense about how this is a white value neutral type presentation, that when you link, why does it become a reason to just reject them, and all those other forms of questions. Like, I think you should just kicked out of that, be like, don't hold us to that. They don't make any formal conditionality bad type arguments, negation theory testing on 2 different levels, and then also the generic, like the answer you give is not a contradiction because we focus on the global, they're only focusing on the local, at least so that gives something, but I think that given that it's a contradiction and links to both, it becomes difficult as a reason to reject them. So I look to why it's not a contradiction. Your answer for why it's not a contradiction is because we have to understand how like we're all into this together, the full like global type approach, and then therefore we have to recognize that like women of color are also responsible for climate change. And so the answer that I don't see effectively dealt with is then, what does that mean when women of color don't have their hands on the levers of power? How could, the two of them be able to actually change the situations to help the global south? And it seems to be then a form of scapegoating where colonizers made a bunch of pollution, and because of that, and past systems of colonization, black and red bodies end up in a place where they're forced to end up polluting, and then white people are like, you're the ones to blame, not us, right? And so I think that then creates enough offense for me to be like, the one way that you answer the contradiction links back into their offense, which becomes problematic. I do think you're doing a good job at sort of articulating your link stories, and I understand sort of like the race, gender, Hegelian dialect type situations, their attempt to try and change the world, the attempt to say that human survival is important, reinstallation. So I think you're dealing really good on the link story, which is why it baffled me that you didn't just go for the K proper with the alt that's able to resolve it, because there's no real press against that alternative outside the contradiction. So that would become really simple for me. For the two of you, I would say that if you have me in the future, that I'm someone who is generally going to follow the flow more, and so when you displace the entire debate onto that first page in the 2IR, I'm generally going to be unwilling to do a lot of cross applications in that regard. Like, fortunately, that start of the debate is all about the contradiction, which is what I'm voting on, so I don't have to do that cross application work for you. But if it came down for them going the alt and your style was to say contradictions and then you get to the K and not answering like the 4 reasons for why the permutation is insufficient when that's like what the 20R sits on, it's going to be sort of difficult to get my ballot. So at least putting the ink on the relevant piece of paper, even if you're not doing like line by line, makes it easier for them to line up opposed to like shifting it all back over there. And I would also really watch your coverage in 2AC, 1AR, 2AR of like the K as the biggest as the position. You spend a lot of time on your case page, and the first like 30 seconds to a minute of every speech is sort of re-explaining how you're always in the process of remaking the body and stuff like that. And it's like, I get that, I don't need to hear that in every speech by the end. What I want to hear is, how does that answer the position? How does that interact with their other forms of arguments? And I think that would be more effective opposed to just be like, overview, explain the case again, because at this point is now, how is this case going to be able to respond to different things? And I think you do a good job at that when you finally get to those portions of the debate, but you're just not getting there with enough time. And then certainly offense against the alternative in this debate, I think it's easy to explain why when passing white people say you should distill the value of life, why the two of you are able to be like, that's really fucked up for you to tell that to us given our position and your position in that round. and then they're either gonna have to backpedal there, or they're gonna have to double down on that, and either sort of situation is good for you, because you can either be like, well, see how they pull back, means it's ground for the permutation, or double down, see how it's offensive, and then you get, you know, the primary form of offense, and I think that would, you know, be a good way to situate your app versus criticisms of this.
That makes sense.
Questions?
I have a question
Yep.
about this. Gone to the evidence that we're reading about kind of like the symbolic exchange of like black mothering, as what like either like we're just not explaining it well, like in the way that I think is what you're telling us about this idea that there's no value in life, that it's fucked up to say that to like black women of color, because like the argument we're saying, right, is that black mothering is like kind of the precondition for what is able to be human in the first place, that we're always laboring to create that kind of effective exchange of who has property or ownership of life. And that's always the black mother who's kind of like, she's kind of damned if she does and damned if she doesn't, because she kind of produces that kind of abjection that is used as kind of the archetype for, like I said, dispossessed bodies, but also then is made the victim or blame. But the criminalization argument, really, that this life is like bad, or that this life is always seen as an excess or like the residue. So I guess, how then do we argue that a bit better in a world where like I think that is answering the whole it's fucked up to say that all life has the kind of same idea of value, that we are kind of the precursor to how humanism enacts value to life in the first place.
Yeah, I see that argument articulated as a no-link argument, or a you solve humanism argument via the permutation, and not their alternative is bad impact term, right? Level of it. So it's like all that analysis you just give, I'm seeing it in the debate, but the way I'm seeing when you say what I should do with it, it means that you unravel humanism, you know, black mothers were never conditioned, don't have access to the question of the human from the get-go and stuff like that, but they have other links to how you're humanist beyond that one individual situation. But I think that what you're saying is that then when you're like, their alternative that says that we should say life is bad, that is the abjection of the black mother that has existed from the get-go, which is why we should never allow for that alternative, because you have to eliminate that abjection of how the black mother has been constructed, right? So I think it's less of an issue of, you know, not articulating the argument you're saying, but more an issue of how you want to implicate that, right? So it's like, here's the argument in the thesis, and it responds to the thesis claim, but then what you say I should do with that response to the thesis is not reject you, is vote for you because you don't link to the position or such, so there's a world to do both. But then there's other links that they have, such as like the race, gender, Hegelian dialect type question, or like, you know, or trying to act within the world questions, which might be separate than the race question, that, you know, there'll be residual links, so it wouldn't get you out of 100% of their linked stories. But if you move that from being the justification to the permutation to the impact term to the alternative, that could then function as a net benefit to the perm, I think that then it's going to be easier for me to see how that is being articulated as offense in the individual realm.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Other questions?